everybody, Bobby here from the GM Table, and we're doing another review. Hey, like I said, Bobby here from the GM Table, and yeah, we're doing another review. I'm currently going through the backlog of all of the great games Free League Publishing sent me, and we're going to start with what was at least my introduction to their games, Tales from the Loop. Now, this is a beefy book. In fact, I would pick it up and show you, but I barely have it perched on my stand because it is heavy. It sits at about 191 pages, but the rules are not nearly that long. Before we get into that, if you somehow aren't familiar with Tales from the Loop, the tagline for it is role-playing in the 80s that never was. Tales from the Loop, and when we get into the sequel, Things from the Flood, are alternate history games. Specifically, this one is an alternate history of the 1980s. And honestly, if you ask me, them calling it the 1980s might be its greatest weakness, because it's the 1980s with flying cars, super tech, crazy advanced robotics. It is zany and awesome and dark, but very little of it feels specifically like the 1980s. It's more the 1980s idea of the future that also happens to be taking place in the 1980s. Now, there are two pre-built settings in the book. Both of them take place in the same world, but there are two loops, which are the locations the game takes place. This is a Swedish-made game, and the first loop is the Swedish loop, and it has its own town and everything, but they do also provide a US loop and a location for that. I'm going to be very honest. When I run this, I actually don't run it in setting. There's interesting, cool stuff in the setting. We're going to get into some of it, but why I love this game is actually the mechanics. So with that, we're going to shift into that. All of the rules for playing this are only 27 pages. It is a very rules-light game. It uses the Year Zero engine, but it uses what I like to call Zero Light, because it uses the Year Zero engine, but uses a much lighter version of it, and it has some very cool concepts. Now, as with many Year Zero engines, you do kind of pick an archetype or a trope or something, and this they call it your type. It's the type of kid you are, because in Tales from the Loop, you play about 10 to 12-year-olds. Now, on top of that, 10 to 12, it's a range. You actually pick your age, and your age is going to matter a lot, because your age will determine how many attributes you get, how many skills you get, and then the younger you are, the more luck you have. And luck is kind of a reroll mechanic. So younger characters have their own advantages and disadvantages versus older characters, and it's a sliding scale based on specifically your age, like year by year. So that choice can really matter. Now, if you aren't familiar with the Year Zero system, it is a D6 die pool system where you have your attribute and you have your skill. Your attribute's a number, then your skill, which is tied to that attribute, is a number. Add those numbers together, that's how many D6s you roll. Only 6s count. Yes, it is hard to get successes. One success is considered a pretty hard thing. Below that, you shouldn't even have to make checks. So kind of the scale starts at hard and just gets harder. Anything below that, you shouldn't have to roll, just role play it out. Along with that, there's other ways to get extra dice. One of the big ones is gear. Every character gets to start with an iconic piece of gear, which I love because of how that system's set up is it doesn't actually have to be an object. If you want to play like Shaggy and have your Scooby-Doo, Scooby-Doo can be your iconic piece of gear. It can be a pet. It can be an animal. It can be all those kind of things without a bunch of unique mechanics. Now, what is your iconic piece of gear? Well, the iconic piece of gear is essentially a level 2 item that the GM cannot take away from you. And I'm saying level 2 like you know what it is. In the rules, there's level 1 through 3 items, and that is how many extra dice they add. A level 1 item is helpful, but it's not super great. It's good enough to give you a mechanical boost. It gives you 1 extra die when the item's used. Level 2 gives you 2 extra die. Level 3 are crazy good items. They give you 3 extra die. Normal items can be taken away and broken, destroyed, stolen, all of that. But your iconic item, because it's supposed to be intrinsic to who your character is, and this isn't actually that punishing of a game, is an item that, by the rules, the GM might make unavailable for like a scene, but they cannot take away from you. You will always get them back. The dog will not die, which I appreciate. Now, those were the really basic rules, not all the rules you need, but really basic ones. Now we're going to get into the other half of the rules, which are the rules of why I love this game. A D6 die pool, it's cool, it's useful. Okay, it's just the dice mechanic. What I love is when you fail a check, any check, you get a condition. And conditions are kind of like the wounds of this game. In fact, one of them is injured. And I think one of the beautifully simplistic parts of this is there's 4 conditions: scared, upset, exhausted, and injured. None of them have unique mechanical effects. You just get one of those conditions, and for each condition you have, you reduce your die pool on all rolls by 1 for every condition you have. Once you get all 4 of your conditions and you would normally get another condition, you're instead broken, which in this game basically means you're knocked unconscious because Tales from the Loop's mechanics assume characters don't die. If that's not your bag, wait till we get into the sequel, Things from the Flood, which is my personal favorite game, but I'm getting ahead of myself. That is this game, but they added death mechanics and a few other things. Again, wait for that, but this is still going to tell you most of what you need to know. So I love this because I can determine what the outcome of a roll is. If you fail this, you're going to become scared. What if they're already scared? Well, if they're already scared, they then get to pick a different one because they already have scared. So it's very narrative. They're simple enough where you go, all right, you failed this, you're scared. Let's just move on and let's role play it. Role play actually comes very much first in this game. In fact, the big thing and the thing that I really love about this and Things from the Flood, and a lot of Year Zero ones, but these 2 in particular, is while there are skills to heal characters, aka remove conditions, the main way your character is going to be healing is by role playing. There's both, every character both has an anchor, which is this one NPC they kind of build during character creation that is their emotional anchor. If you go to them and you have a role play scene, not just, oh, I go to them. I mean, a GM could allow it, but you're not really using the rules as they tell you to. If you go to them and you actually have a scene where that NPC takes care of you, supports you, is there for you, is your emotional anchor, you heal all your conditions. You have a role play scene that matters mechanically. Now, there's also in this one the mechanic of the hideout, which is kind of like the secret clubhouse or the hideaway all the characters share. If 2 players share a scene of bonding in that location, they both also heal. And this is, to me, the magic of, again, why I'm calling Zero Light, but these specific types of Year Zero games of they've included mechanics that let you use role play to have mechanical weight. A lot of games allow for role play. And yes, a good GM might reward players for role play, but there's very little other than here's a treat like a Benny or inspiration that are these nebulous, you could give them, you don't have to. There's very little actual mechanics in games of if you role play based on these themes or prompts, which makes role play a little bit more like, oh, I don't know, improv, then you get a mechanical reward. And that is what I love about this game. Hey, everybody, Editing Bobby here, just kind of interjecting because I forgot to record this, but if these rules, especially taking what I'm calling the Zero Light mechanics and pushing them beyond the pre-made settings of Tales from the Loop, Things from the Flood, and all of that, and seeing where they can actually go with it, I want to point out that on Tuesdays, we've actually been using the Things from the Flood rules to do a supernatural teen horror game in the year 2000 called Tales from 2000, which that's live on our Twitch as well as now it's a podcast. On top of that, if you're curious how that's all done, we're starting to do custom rules because as we've said in those podcasts, we actually got permission from Free League Publishing to make our own games using the rules specifically in these games that aren't in the actual Year Zero OGL. We're doing playtests of that on our Patreon. Anyways, back to the normal recording. Anyways, next week, I'm going to be talking about Things from the Flood, the sequel from Tales from the Loop, where I'm going to be gushing even more. But with that, I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.